The United States is facing a major immigration issue, a border crisis, an invasion.
A border shutdown in El Paso, Texas, as hundreds force their way onto the Paso del Norte International Bridge.
And there's no one that you talk to in South America that isn't aware that the U.S. border is open. They all know.
Everything's for sale here. People, water, sex, you name it. This is what desperation looks like.
These are two 16-year-old Colombian girls. They had no idea what was awaiting them on the other side as they would begin their journey into the Darièn Gap. And almost certainly, these girls did not make it, or at least they did not make it intact. Now, according to CNN, this is all being brought on by, can you guess, climate change. So what in fact is going on in South America? Well, I decided to go there, and I've been there probably no less than 10 times in just the last 5 years. I've been tracking these caravans, interviewing some of these migrants, and to discover what is causing them to make a run towards the United States. Our border crisis, an invasion of the United States, failed immigration policy. By now, everyone knows this. The world knows this and is paying attention to it. Part of what I seek to do for you on Ideas Have Consequences is not just simply to express my perpetual rage, as so many conservative commentators do. We're all outraged by the failure of border enforcement, of immigration law. But rather, what I want to do is to inform you of what's happening, who's doing it, and who these people are who are coming into the United States, why they're coming. Now, over the course of the past several years, I have been interviewing and tracking migrant caravans as they're making their way to the United States. This has taken me to Chile, to Argentina, to Brazil, to Colombia multiple times. And it has taken me to Panama. It has taken me to Mexico City and Costa Rica. In this particular episode of Ideas Have Consequences, we're going to reveal to you how deep the rot really is and where your blame should be placed. I would suggest to you not so much on the migrants themselves, but on the Biden administration that is running a massive human trafficking op. So on this latest trip, I went to Colombia, from Colombia to Panama, and Panama to Mexico to follow these people as they're making their way northward. Now, why those countries in particular? Well, Colombia is the northernmost country in South America. If you just take a look at a map, if you're walking as opposed to flying into the United States, and as we reveal in this particular documentary and that I revealed some months ago, the Biden administration is, of course, flying people to destinations unknown into the United States. But if you're walking to the United States from South America, you have to go through the dreaded Darièn Gap. Now, the Darièn Gap is the Hotel California of jungles. It's roughly 60 kilometers of jungle that sits like a cork on top of South America. Once impenetrable, these hundreds of thousands, and now dare I say millions of migrants who are going through the Darièn Gap have now forged something of a trail, a pathway, multiple trails and pathways through the Darièn Gap. And it's the only way that they can do it to get into the United States, again, if they're not being flown. So we flew there. I flew there. I flew from Cartagena, Colombia, down to Necoclì to the jumping off point for the Darièn Gap. There we saw loads of migrants making their way on ferries to begin their journey through the Darièn Gap. Then I flew into the jungle on the Panamanian side, and they're engaged with Senafront, the Panamanian Border Patrol, and saw what was taking place there. And then from there to Mexico. And why Mexico? Because, of course, they all have to go through Mexico as well. But what we discover along the way is not only just who these people are, but how this whole operation is working through NGOs, through the United Nations, through the United States funding, and I suspect funding through Ukraine, but it's simply speculation on my part, to make this whole thing go. So stay tuned. Most emergencies come without warning, and when the next one comes, you won't have time to pack and prepare. You need to get ready now before an emergency strikes. Your supplies should be ready to grab and to go right away. Secure those supplies at my website, preparewithideas.com. Start with 4-week emergency food kits from my Patriot Supply. Helping millions of Americans prepare since 2008, My Patriot Supply are experts in self-reliance. Their 4-week emergency food kits offer over 2,000 calories every day. Protected by heavy-duty 4-layer packaging, these kits last up to 25 years. Sealed inside rugged, handled buckets, they're made to grab quickly. Go to preparewithideas.com and save $50 per kit. They ship fast and free in unmarked boxes. Save $50 per kit at preparewithideas.com.
With my driver in Cartagena, Colombia. This is, kind of a decent area here, but we're moving to an area that's not so nice. And it's where some of the migrants are passing through. Mostly Venezuelans are passing through here, but not just Venezuelans. You have people coming from all over South America, the Middle East, and China. And why are the Chinese coming here rather than, say, going north of Darièn? Darièn is, roughly 60 miles of dangerous jungle, some of the most dangerous jungle in the world. Why would you go south of Darièn? Well, because north of Darièn, you cannot get a visa. But the Chinese can come into these countries, several of them, either with an e-visa, a visa on arrival, or no visa whatsoever.
Let me tell you a little bit about how the migrant crisis works. The Biden administration has essentially sent out a global message that our border is unprotected, that it is open, that you can come, and not only can you come, that you will receive assistance in coming. So you have people who are coming from the Middle East, from Asia, from Africa, and from all over this continent. But you see, every country that they pass through, they don't want them. So they set up aid stations in order to say, hey, here's some medicine, here's some food, here's a little bit of money, go that way, leave our country. The United States is in that direction. So that's what we're doing. But you may wonder, where is the money coming from? Well, look at the sign behind me, U.S. Aid. So it's your tax dollars that the Biden administration is using in order to assist these people coming to the United States. In other words, the Biden administration is an active participant in human trafficking. That's what's happening. I want to give you a little update following up on what I told you yesterday in a thread that I posted on Twitter on X. Now, as many of you would know, I have been following these mass migrations all over South America. And today I'm mostly chilling. I'm recovering from some rather stressful activity. This is the beautiful city of Cartagena that you see behind me. But there's a piece out in the New York Times by Julie Turkowitz, came out just a couple of days ago. She has another one out today, and it essentially states the Biden administration's public stance on these migrations. Now, the article, it's a good article. I would encourage you to read it. But the subtitle, which the authors almost never get to choose, the subtitle is very deceptive. Indeed, I would say that it's a lie, because it says that the Biden administration is trying to stem the tide of these mass migrations into the United States. So they're putting pressure on the Colombian government, on presumably other governments in Central and South America in order to prevent these migrations. The fact of the matter is they're doing nothing of the kind. And in fact, they're doing, as I told you yesterday, they're doing exactly the opposite. As the article states, what they are doing is they are trying to prevent, at least sort of, these migrations through the Darièn Gap. And that is because the Darièn Gap is incredibly dangerous. Indeed, I would say that it's a human tragedy what is taking place at Darièn. but don't fall for it. They're not trying to prevent migrations into the United States at all. It's a deception because, as we know, as I told you yesterday, they're using the United Nations, NGOs, and your tax dollars to fly these illegals from all over South America, from here in Cartagena, into unknown destinations, undisclosed destinations in the United States. This is just a picture of rural Colombia. I think the pews are hard in your church. Very different circumstances here. Tremendous poverty. Making our way to Necoclì this morning. A couple of pilots from Barranquilla about to take us there. It's about an hour's flight from Cartagena. Jerry and I are on our way down to Necoclì in the west of Colombia. Necoclì is where all the illegal migrants who are coming from all over this continent are going in order to make their way to the United States. Now, if you're trying to go to the United States by foot, and as we pointed out to you in previous posts, the Biden administration is, via a series of NGOs in the United Nations, flying some of these illegals into the United States, but not all of them. Many, roughly 2,500 a day, are making their way through the dangerous Darièn Gap. And Darièn is the way to get to Darièn. You got to make your way either to Necoclì or to Turbo, which is just to the south of Necoclì. Both are in Colombia. Now, most Americans don't realize how big Colombia is. Colombia is roughly twice the size of Texas. And if you're going to go through Darièn, you have to go through Colombia. And that's because Colombia is the only South American country that is on both the Atlantic and the Pacific sides. So this is where these people are going. It's like that scene in, it's like the movie Casablanca, where people are waiting and waiting and waiting there, as the opening monologue says, for a plane to Lisbon so that they can then catch a freighter or a flight to the United States. That's what's happening in Necoclì. The problem is that this is a place of massive human trafficking. So when they get to Necoclì, they're hoping to take a ferry. But they're hoping to take a ferry.
They have to take a ferry.
Yeah, to either south of Darièn or north of Darièn, depending on
the money. Depending on the pay. If you got money, you go fast.
That's right.
You know, you have to cross the jungle all the way to Panama, and there is a place where you arrive. It's an Indian place, and they're waiting for you there to cross you to another country.
Absolutely. So a lot of those who can afford to pay are Chinese. Thus, they're taking either easier routes through Darièn because they can afford to pay for it, or they're skipping Darièn altogether. Those people who can't afford, which tend to be mostly Venezuelans, Haitians, and Cubans, they are having to take the cheap route, the hard route, through Darièn, and many of them are disappearing. So it kind of reminds me of the annual migrations of the wildebeest through the Serengeti, where the crocodiles are waiting for them in the rivers. In this case, the crocodiles are the mafia waiting in Necoclì, in Turbo, and in the Darièn Gap itself. So our pilots are going to get us there shortly. They're going to wait for us there as we take a look around.
Yeah, we have to come back today because we don't know there what happened.
We have no idea.
Yeah.
The pilots just told us we can't land. And the reason is because there are cattle all over the runway. So it gives you an idea of where we are. This is essentially jungle, and there's no one to move them off. So we are trying to get them off by buzzing them or just flying right over their heads and then climbing before we run into the trees. But we're going to make another pass at them just over their heads to try to scare them off the runway. Otherwise, we just keep circling here. We just keep circling because we can't land. Can your savings weather an economic storm? Think about what you've put away for the future. Inflation can render cash worthless. Real estate can crash like it did in 2008. Economies built on a mountain of debt fall like a house of cards. There are very few physical assets you can invest in that stand the test of time. Gold has stood as a valued form of money for millennia. That's why people are flocking to it now and why Birch Gold is busier than ever. Through a little-known tax loophole, Birch Gold lets you convert a retirement account into a tax-sheltered IRA in physical gold. And the best part is it doesn't cost you a penny out of pocket. To learn more, text IDEAS to 989898 and claim your free info kit on gold. Let me ask you this again. Can your IRA or 401k weather an economic storm? If not, call the people I trust, Birch Gold. Text IDEAS to 989898 and secure your savings today.
So here we are in Necoclì. You see how remote this is. Now on our approach, we had cattle all over the runway. So you have cow chips all over the runway. This is the little airport here, but there's nobody here. There's not a soul here. We're supposed to be met by a translator of sorts, a fixer, as you might call him. He's not here. So now we're trying to figure out how we're going to get into to Necoclì, which is, only about 3 kilometers from here, but you don't want to be walking it. So my guy is trying to sort all that out. Meanwhile, the pilots will prepare the plane for the journey back. But okay, here we have a gendarme who's making his way out here, so we'll see. Hey fellas. The gendarmes are looking us over pretty carefully. This is common in the third world, by the way. These being detained, however briefly. They saw us landing, they made their way out here to the airport, if it can really be called that. I mean, again, it's completely abandoned, and so you just have to expect these kind of delays. But they're looking the plane over pretty carefully, looking to see if we're carrying cocaine or some other kind of contraband, and we wait. We see what happens next. But again, I've become very, very used to these kinds of delays. We're now in Necoclì. This town is chock full of migrants. And they're illegal here, by the way. They're not just illegal aliens in the United States, should they make it to the United States. They're illegal in every country they pass through, other than their countries of origin. So here we are. Normally, Necoclì is under different times. This is a beach town. This is a resort town. This is Fort Lauderdale. This is Panama City. But not now. Colombians themselves are generally afraid to come here now because of all of the illegal immigrants who are here trying to make their way to and through Darièn Gap and ultimately to the U.S. border. This is all largely being run by cartels, so there's a lot of nervousness about this place. Some of the ferries are leaving here. People are boarding, children are screaming. People are doing anything they can. This is Africa level chaos. And if you've been to proper Africa, you know what I'm talking about. This is what desperation looks like.
This is Immigrants.
Again, what agency is doing this? The OIM. Behind me, people are boarding these ferries. Now, you will hear names being called out. It's almost like this is bingo. It's some kind of lottery as names are being called and people board behind me here. I don't know if you can see the ferries there, but it's absolutely what is happening. And the police are not real keen on me doing any filming here, but that's what's going on. Everything's for sale here. People, water, sex, you name it. It's all for sale here. Jerry is talking to a guy here who's from Santa Marta, Colombia. He's trying to make his way to the United States. Now, I asked him where he wanted to go, and he said that he actually corrected me. He said he isn't trying to go to the United States. He's trying to go to Canada, though he has thought about trying to go to California. I didn't have the heart to tell him, you're fleeing socialism to go to get more socialism. I mean, Canada and Venezuela are on their way to becoming the next Venezuela's, the next Colombia. Now with the election of their socialist, their Marxist president is headed in that direction. But again, he's a guy who's trying to save some money, trying to make some money, because right now he's stranded here because he doesn't have the money to make the passage.
Many people have commented on the fact that migrants are often well-dressed. That is to say, you see them wearing, let's say, a Chicago Bulls jersey or a New York Mets jersey or a New York Yankees hat or what appear to be name brand clothing. Well, let me explain to you that it isn't what you might think that it is, that it's because they have lots of money and are buying these things. It has to do with the fact that a lot of the clothes that you donate to your local charities end up being put on containers and shipped to the third world, where they are sold there very cheaply. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry. You think you're donating your clothes to people locally in need. Not so in most cases. It's being shipped around the world. And what you will find is flea markets and little stores are selling these things in the third world, and that's where these people are buying it.
These are people who are making their way on these ferries from Necoclì.
Ellos son de Venezuela. They are from Venezuela. And they are leaving today to the United States. That's the dream, to be there.
Papi, dile chao.
Chao. Que Dios los bendiga.
Amén. Igualmente. Gracias por sus bendiciones.
I think we have Haitians right here as well. So I'm in the tuk-tuk in Necoclì. We've been engaging migrants, illegal immigrants all over the place here. They're all waiting. They're trying to make money any way they can in order to make their way to the United States. Now, here in just a minute, we're going to another one of these ferry stations here. People are a little reluctant to talk to me, but once they see that we're friendly, we don't mean them any harm, they start talking to us, and the stories are heartbreaking. These people are being taken advantage of by absolutely everybody. So we're gonna go have a few more conversations here and see what's going on here. This is another place where the ferries are leaving for Darièn Gap. Colombian immigration officials assisting these people to make their way out to the ferries and then to make their way across. You can see so much of what's going on here is extemporized. And this over here, this is the OIM. This is the nonprofit organization that I was telling you about that the Biden administration is using to fly people to the United States. Now, they're not flying them from here. They're doing something very different from here, but that's the nonprofit that is playing a role in a lot of this. It's one of the ferries right here. Actually, two of them. Señoritas.
Turns out these are two 16-year-old Colombian girls, fresh-faced, boarding this ferry like they're getting on a Disney ride. Now, this particular scene would keep me up at night because I would keep replaying it in my head because I knew these were girls who'd never been outside of their own country. They had no idea what was awaiting them on the other side as they would begin their journey into the Darièn Gap. And almost certainly these girls did not make it, or at least they did not make it intact, because they are exactly the sorts of people, girls, young girls, who would be the targets of not only the cartels, but also of the indigenous peoples there. These are the sorts of individuals who disappear in the jungle, who are raped, who are trafficked. And so trying to talk to them and asking them if they had any idea what was awaiting them on the other side, it was clear I was never going to make a dent. And I watched them disappear over the horizon in one of these boats. As for what happened to them, I can only imagine.
What we've just seen are people who are going to America via steerage class. Not economy class, definitely not economy plus. Now we're going to see where the Chinese are going. You see, they are coming with money, and thus they are staying in hotels. They're not camping on the beaches like a lot of these other people. Listen, just a little pro tip when you're traveling. You want to know anything about a city, you find a taxi driver. Taxi drivers know a city like nobody else. And this guy here tells us he knows where they are staying. So we're making our way in that direction. This hotel is full of Chinese, but they're avoiding my cameras. Now you can see them up the steps there, but they're definitely avoiding the cameras. Necoclì, Sin City, a place of hope, a place of devils. You might look at all this behind me and think, gosh, this looks like a painting. It could be a lovely vacation spot. And Necoclì in normal times is a vacation spot. Not now. Not since Biden assuming office in 2020. Not since the COVID pandemic. People have been coming here in waves since then. It's kind of died as a tourist town, but that doesn't mean money still isn't flowing. It is flowing. It's flowing in a big way, but it's on the black market, is through the cartels. Now, the people that you will meet here, any one of you who has a heart, by and large, you would feel great sympathy for these people. They're risking absolutely everything. I imagine it's the same kind of mentality as the kind of people who boarded the Mayflower, who boarded ships to make the dangerous Atlantic crossing in order to get to America. It's the same mentality here. I'm not talking about the criminal element. I'm not talking about the cartels. I'm not talking about those kinds of people. Rather, I'm talking about people who simply are fleeing socialism. And again, this continent has systematically fallen once again to Marxists. They're fleeing it in an effort to get to the United States, and in the process they're risking everything. Now these boat captains are charging them roughly $150 a head. Now that to you may not sound like a lot of money. For these people it's an extraordinary sum of money. That's much more than a month's wages. For Venezuelans especially. Colombians might make on average, maybe $100 a month. The common laborer, the people who work in my hotel, make roughly $18 to $20 a day. That's not including tips, which they don't get a lot of. So this is the kind of situation that these people find themselves in, so that they're here waiting to try to make the jump over to Darièn. And Darièn is insanely dangerous. It is roughly 60 kilometers, or rather 60 miles of dense jungle. And there's every kind of predator there, animals as well as human beings, militias, cartels, indigenous peoples, you name it. So these are people who are utterly desperate to do it. And they're boarding these boats with children, small children. And just talking to some of them, I asked them, I mean, are you willing to risk Darièn with these children? And they say, yes, we have no choice. We have no choice. That's what you find here. Back to the airport. Airport is a generous term. There's no one here, no electricity, no nothing. It's like Planet of frickin' Apes. Colombia is an extraordinary country. Indeed, it's probably my favorite country in South America. I love the Colombian people. They're fascinating, colorful, literally and figuratively. And you can find in Colombia almost anything from crack to beautiful art, wonderful food. It's a country of extraordinary poverty, but it's also a country of, you know, just really, really beautiful people, beautiful places, beautiful music. So I'd never want to give the impression that I think Colombia is an awful country, because I don't. And I don't think it of Mexico, and I don't think it of Panama. But these are countries where human trafficking, which is being aided by the Biden administration, has become a blight. It has become a human crisis. And the Biden administration is aiding it and abetting it.
Now, the Darièn Gap, this is, what country is the Darièn Gap in?
Darièn,
is that Panama?
A little geography. Colombia is a huge country. A lot of Americans don't realize that. It's almost twice the size of Texas. It's the only country in South America that is on both the Atlantic and the Pacific side. And Darièn, the Darièn Gap, sits on top of this dense jungle through which there's no road. So people think of the the Pan American Highway as running from Alaska all the way to the tip of Argentina. They think of it as an unbroken highway. That actually isn't true. It stops at Darièn. So if you're going to make that drive with Suzanne, Eric, you just need to know you have to take a ferry in Panama, go around the Darièn Gap to Colombia. And so it's impenetrable, at least by automobile. You can't go through on an automobile. You can't go through on a motorcycle. You can't.
Doesn't that seem preposterous? Why would that be? You'd think that they would be able to build a road.
Well, I frankly do not want to see them build a road, but you know, it was the American, and by that I mean the United States, dream to build a highway through there. There was a lot of effort to do that. Nixon hoped to have a highway named after him that went through the Darièn Gap. Panamanians have always been a little less enthusiastic about that because they see Darièn as a kind of bulwark, a protection against migrants moving northward through their own country. So they've never been too excited about that. And again, bear in mind, Panama and Colombia used to be the same country. They were Colombia until the United States came along and in an effort to build the Panama Canal, gave independence to Panama. So, there's a lot of politics that are going on there. But geographically speaking, if you're going to make your way from South America to the United States, you have to go through, over, or around the Darièn Gap. And most people don't have the money to do that. So they're entering into the Darièn Gap in, these, what should I call them? These groups that are walking through Darièn. And the Darièn Gap is full of militia. It's full of drug cartels, control it, and indigenous people, to say nothing of wild animals, crocodiles, this kind of thing. So it's a kind of Hotel California where people check in but don't leave.
It's horrifying.
Yeah,
I
very
was
much
unaware.
so.
I was quite unaware of this. So thank you for this. Thank you for all this information.
The information I'm about to share with you might shock you. Right now, there is a silent epidemic affecting 100 million Americans that nobody wants to talk about. It's called fatty liver. We throw everything at our livers: cholesterol, alcohol, toxins, heavy metals, statins, cigarettes. That's why so many of us have a sluggish, fatty liver that makes us gain weight and lose energy. Fatty liver also affects our sleep quality and may be a risk to our heart health. That's why it's important to start protecting your liver today. You can do so with Liver Health Formula. It's an all-natural supplement which contains 11 clinically proven botanicals that help recharge and protect your liver. This company already has helped more than 2 million fellow Americans with their products. Try Liver Health Formula by going to getliverhelp.com/Larry and claim your free bonus gift. That's getliverhelp.com/Larry.
I'm here in one of the hangars in Panama City, Panama, getting ready to fly down to the Darièn Gap. Now, this is a fairly complicated process, and it's because Darièn, it straddles two countries, Colombia to the south and Panama to the north. And there are aspects of it that are a national park. I mean, it's the kind of place where you can go and do a zip line and, hang out with your buddies and camp out. But that's not the way the entire Darièn Gap is. And the part that we're trying to go to, well, that's a little bit different. So there have to be permissions that are obtained by the pilots. They have to check and see who I am and what we're doing and why we're going there. So it's very early getting one of these planes out of here, and we're going to head down there shortly, and then we will hike and ride horses into the gap.
In the American mind, Central and South America are connected as if by highway. We've all heard of the famed Pan American Highway. It sort of captures the imagination as a marvelous journey, an adventure that someone could take from Alaska all the way to the tip of Argentina. But the reality is that's not so. The fact of the matter is the Pan American Highway is dangerous among much of its length in Central America. And then when you get to Panama, to southern Panama, to eastern Panama, you encounter the Darièn Gap. And no road goes through the Darièn Gap. So if you ever decide to go on the Pan American Highway, you're going to have to take a ferry from there around the Darièn Gap to Colombia to continue the journey. Geographically speaking, it is at present an impassable jungle for any kind of motorized vehicle.
Heavily overcast. Darièn Gap has constant rain. I mean, it is a rain forest. We're very close to the coast, and we'll be landing about a mile, maybe a mile and a half from the Colombian border. So we're on the Panamanian side of the Darièn Gap. Be landing here shortly.
Here we are in the airport. This man is our guide into the jungle. This one,
not that one.
Él terminó las horas que tenía ayer, entonces para lo que es el preventivo, porque él salió del anual y le quedan un par de horas más el tema del aceite. Sí. En este caso.
We're at Puerto Obaldia, just on the Colombian border, on the Panama side of the Colombian border. This is the old airstrip. Now, the airstrip that we just landed on is a good one as jungle airports go, jungle airfields. This is the old landing strip. Before these houses were built along here, there's new construction here for residences. Getting a few supplies before we head into the gap. Just spoken to the Frontier Guard, the element of the Army that patrols the Darièn Gap and the Colombian Panamanian border. And they tell us that many of the immigrants are passing through here, and curiously, that this government ship right here is used to spot them. And I just happened to ask them. I mean, it says Philippians 4:13 on the side, which of course means it's a biblical reference that says I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. It's kind of an odd verse to have on a government ship. So I kind of challenge the narrative that it is a government ship, but he insists that it is. But back over here, these boats, every single one of them, are boats that were confiscated by the Frontier Guard, by human traffickers, people who are bringing human beings, mostly, he says, Venezuelans, Cubans, some Colombians, Haitians, many others, and Chinese on these boats, bringing them from Necoclì. So this is where they're coming from, or rather coming to. So we've already been on the other side, so we know where they're coming from. Now, here we are on the Panamanian side, but we've run into a bit of trouble here, which I'll explain in a minute. We are waiting for the guide, the main guide, to show up to take us into the Darièn Gap. Now, if you haven't traveled much, I will tell you that when you leave the United States and you go to places like Central America and South America and Africa and even France and Italy, a few other places, you'll discover that your schedule is of little concern to those that you work with. You say the meeting starts at 7 a.m., they might show up at 9:30. This right here, by the way, we've got time, it seems. This used to be an American military base. So again, we're just on the edge of the Darièn Gap on the Panamanian side. We are, gosh, a mile and a half from the Colombian border. We're very, very close. Little family history for you. My father served down here. He was in the United States Army for most of his career, but he spent 2 years in the Navy. And much of that time was spent in the Canal Zone. Now, we're not near the Canal Zone. That's in Panama City, just outside Panama City, Panama. But when the Navy discovered that he was a good baseball player, he said he just spent most of his time playing baseball for the Navy's baseball team. Got to play against the Yankees and the Dodgers, who in those days would do their spring training in the Canal Zone. So a little interesting family history for you. I think we're just about ready to head out here. Okay, no?
There was a time when only the extreme extremely daring would go through the Darièn Gap. And by that I mean explorers who are themselves equipped for the extremely arduous journey. In many cases, you still didn't even hear from them. They just disappeared. But now the Darièn Gap, I won't say it's become easy. I will say that it has become less impassable. And that's simply due to the fact that with the massive human traffic that is going through the Darièn Gap, it's becoming easier. Think about a local forest where you have trails. The more people who go through it, the easier it becomes. And that's because the people ahead of you, they put a rope down the side of a hill to make it a little easier to climb, perhaps putting a few footholds in, or perhaps even steps, maybe laying down stones on a creek to make it easier to cross, and a rope to hold on to as you do so, maybe even eventually a bridge or a few boards or something to this effect. Well, that's what's happening. So at one time I would hear just a few years ago that going through the Darièn Gap was an arduous 2-week journey. And even then you might not make it. Then I began hearing it was 10 days and a week. And just recently, about 2 months ago, they opened up yet a new pathway. And this one, how long? 3 days. So all of this human traffic is making it easier. And I would suggest to you that's a very bad thing, because it makes getting to the United States that much easier. You see, nature has been our ally in the history of the United States, geography specifically, because we have been spared some of the horrors of Europe and Africa and Asia by the fact that God has indeed shed his grace on thee. How so? Because we have these two marvelous anti-tank ditches known as the Atlantic and the Pacific, and a generally friendly neighbor to the north and a weak one to the south. Thus, we entered into World War I and World War II at our leisure. Now, however, we are seeing an invasion of our country, the first of its kind, from the south, and there seems to be no effort, in fact, just the opposite, to stop it. It's being facilitated, and it's being facilitated by the Biden administration that wants this to happen.
See, there's barely a path here. Now we got a guy here doing it only in his flip-flops. Okay, we're on one of the migrant paths here, and listen, if you were just out for a day hike, you would look at this and you would think this is really gorgeous. I mean, the view here, which we really can't capture on camera, is really spectacular. We're on a ridge, we're looking down into a valley. Off over here, we look into another valley and we can see the ocean off into the distance. But for migrants on this path, this is deadly, and it's because it's full of deadly snakes. It's full of poisonous spiders, bandits, cartel, paramilitary, you name it, who are here to take advantage of them. So many of them die on this route. And one of the guys that we were just talking to here who takes food and water to them was telling us that it's not uncommon for him to find bodies in here. So this is exceedingly dangerous. And this is all being caused. We were talking to one of the commanders of Centerfront who told us that their numbers last year were almost 600,000 migrants coming through the Darièn Gap. And they expect that number to be well exceeded in 2024. And he would say off camera that this is the problem of the United States. This is something that the Biden administration has caused. As you can see, these paths, these jungle paths, are treacherous. Now, I don't know if you get a sense for elevation, but this is quite steep. And holding a camera while hiking through Darièn isn't particularly compatible, but I'll try to do it. If my body should be found at some point, you can rewind this and see what did me in. I'm told reliably that Centerfront, the Panamanian military has forced these migrant caravans inland, making them stay in the jungles. Now, while they may resent that, it's quite understandable why they should do it. And it's because they're trying to keep them away from Panamanian villages. Panamanian towns would overwhelm these small communities, some indigenous, some not. Again, you don't really get a sense on camera for how steep this is, but I assure you that it's quite steep. Starting to level out a bit here into a beautiful opening. Perhaps you'll be able to get a view here. Valley below. Further on. These caravans, though, are taken advantage of terribly by paramilitary groups, cartels, just random bandits. It happens. And this man right here provides water and food to them. Not for free, though. What's down here?
So this was the migrant path, but what Jeffrey's telling that once here they can see the town if they went through, so the police could get them. So they
push them this way.
Yeah, they opened this.
Push them through here.
Yeah, but then the police noticed that
they found it.
You
can hear the music.
Sorry?
You can hear the music.
Yeah.
And you can see boats.
Yeah.
So it would not be much of a deterrent just to try to keep them in the jungle. They would sooner or later find that it's there. He's speaking to, Yasua is speaking to the very thing that I was just talking about, how they've pushed them inland to try to keep them away from the small villages, Panamanian villages. And one of the guides here said, gosh, it would be so much easier if they let them go into the towns. Well, I actually think that Centerfront is doing these people a favor. These towns are often just a few dozen, maybe a few hundred people. You know, we're talking about maybe 20,000 people in Necoclì, and 1,500 to 2,000 of them a day attempting the cross of the Darièn Gap. Now try to imagine what that would do to these small towns if groups of 1,500 showed up daily. It'd be absolutely impossible. Here comes two migrants. I don't know if you can tell it, but it's very steeply uphill. This is Darièn. An aid station. This aid station is abandoned, or appears to be. These are one of the most deadly weapons in the world. Kill more people than guns, probably. I've seen them used in Africa, all over South America, Central America. But they're also essential hiking through the jungle to cut the vegetation out of your way. Once, when hiking the Appalachian Trail, which is not to be confused with hiking the Darièn Gap, still, it can be dangerous. A friend and I came across a stranded hiker, and it was a storm. 12 inches of rain came down. This is Easter weekend, it's Palm Sunday weekend of 1994. Some of you will remember that as a massive storm that swept across the southeast and killed 44 people. Well, we came across this stranded hiker and said he was missing someone that he was hiking with. My friend was suffering from hypothermia, so he stayed with this lost fellow, and I went, 2 or 3 hours hiking into various trails looking for his friend, and sadly I found him, and he was dead. So I can tell you from personal experience that finding dead bodies on a trail is a rather disturbing occurrence, and this fellow here tells me that he's come across a few here. Often they're people who have died of dehydration. He also says that they're taking products like Red Bull to keep themselves going, and they just go too far. And he believes that many of them, have heart attacks. I can find that quite believable. Dehydration, people are not carrying with them enough water. They're being told not to carry water with them. We're getting closer to civilization now. They're being told not to carry it, and that's because it's heavy. They're being told that they'll find springs along the way where they can get water. The problem with that is that sometimes that water isn't clean, and it leads to sickness. And how does a person who's grown up in the city have any idea how much water they need to go for, a week's worth of hiking through a jungle? I mean, the water is pouring out of me right now, as it should, keeping me cool. But if I didn't have water with me, I could be in trouble in a hurry.
Now, I would have gone further into the jungle if it weren't for the fact that the Senafront outpost commander told me he wouldn't permit me, a gringo, to go very far without Senafront Special Forces with me. They just simply didn't want to risk an American disappearing into that jungle. Interestingly enough, he said to my Venezuelan translator, something happens to you, nobody cares. Something happens to him, it makes headlines.
Waiting on the runway for our plane to arrive to pick us up down here by the Colombian border. Now, what have we learned on this particular journey? Well, first of all, I want to be very clear that my experience in Darièn and the jungles here is nothing like those people who are making their way through it in order to try to make their way to the United States. And the reason for that is A, I'm properly equipped, B, I'm not doing it for that long, C, I know that I have a plane bringing me here and picking me up, and yet still, it's hard. I mean, it's very difficult. As I think I might have mentioned, I've hiked a lot of the Appalachian Trail and in some very difficult circumstances, but all of that would pale in comparison to what these people are doing. Now, a few takeaways from this. One, don't believe much of anything that you're hearing from the Darièn Gap, at least when it comes to data. I find that the data is all over the place. Talking to a Senafront commander down here, the data conflicts with so much of what we're hearing in the United States when it comes to migrant encounters, when it comes to those people who have been processed biometrically, those that were criminals who are being deported. You name it, the data is all over the place. And I don't know that it's because somebody is rigging the data. I think it's just simply because no one really knows how many people are coming through here. I mean, you hear that roughly 600,000 came through here last year. Well, I would imagine that number is actually quite a lot higher. So that's one takeaway. Another takeaway is that the conditions here are absolutely awful, as you might have expected. And it is a human crisis. These people are vulnerable. My answer to that is not to move them through the country more rapidly, my answer is to send the opposite message, that the United States border is not open. You are not welcome. Turn back. Do not come here. A third takeaway is that it is obvious in every country that I'm in, and again, we've come here from the Colombian side, and here we are now in Panama, and I've been in Costa Rica. We'll go from here to Mexico. I have been in, let's see, Peru. Where else? Anyway, a number of other countries that have, Brazil, Chile. People who are coming from all these countries, what you learn is none of these countries want them. None of them want them. And they all think to themselves, what in the world is the United States doing? One government official said to me, he used the word suicide, that this is suicide. And I agree.
I think it's more for them than for us.
Yeah.
They were asking for.
Yeah, they want to make sure we're not carrying drugs. This is typical and actually probably necessary in South America, Central America.
The Panama Canal is truly one of the greatest feats of engineering. Extraordinary.
When I was on the Panamanian side of the Darièn Gap, I am talking to a Senafront outpost commander. And he's showing me the numbers that I just referenced just a moment ago. 520,000 illegals. And when I say illegals, I don't just mean in the United States. These people are illegal in every country they pass through except their country of origin, because none of these countries want them. And he tells me that they've done biometrics on all 520,000 of these people. And then he says, and by the way, I like this guy. He was very nice. He was very helpful. And then he says that, at least you can rest easy because we have weeded out the criminal element in here. Because in doing the biometrics, we then check the biometrics against Interpol to see whether or not they actually have a prison record. A criminal record. I guess prison record too. And I said, but doesn't that assume that rogue countries like, let's say, China and Cuba and Venezuela are uploading their criminal records to Interpol accurately? And he thought about that for a second and said, you got a point. Meaning, they don't know who they're letting through. Just because you checked his biometrics against Interpol doesn't mean he doesn't have a criminal record, because I promise you, the Venezuelans, if they're giving anything to Interpol, it isn't accurate data. They're not doing that. China's not giving accurate data, if any. I don't want those people in our country. However, There are millions of them that are already here. There are millions of illegals who are already here, not criminals. There are many criminals too, but millions of these migrants who are already in the United States. So what response should there be to that? I want to encourage everyone to join our newsletter. That's join.larrytaunton.com. Now, why is that important? Well, because it helps us to maintain contact with you apart from big tech. So whenever there's a new interview, a podcast, a video short, a live, we have the ability to contact you directly without going through big tech. So you can join that by going to join.larrytaunton.com. I'm now in Mexico City, Tláhuac to be specific, an alcaldía of this city. And this area is heavily populated by Haitian migrants. These are people who have flown here. They did not go through the Darièn Gap. They're people who flew here, flew into Nicaragua, made their way here, and they're waiting for their appointment. Now, they've made application to enter the United States using the CPB1 app. And they get an appointment for an interview. And when they're done with the interview, they won't get on buses, they won't hike northward. They will be placed on planes and flown into the United States. They even get to choose the cities where they want to go. And in the case of one fellow we were just talking to, he wants to go to Boston because he has family there. He says he has a dream of serving in the United States Navy. I asked him how they spend their time. Well, as you can imagine, they don't have jobs, they don't have work, so they spend it watching movies, listening to music, eating, talking, smoking, anything. And he acknowledged this isn't productive, it isn't healthy. But these are all people who are desperate to get into the United States because Haiti is essentially suffering a civil war. And most of the people here did not want to be filmed. They would not go on film. Really didn't even want to talk to me because they were fearful that some gang at home would see their image and would take out vengeance upon their family, and in some way there'd be some kind of repercussions. Very, very fearful of this type of thing. They tell me that I'm the first American that they've seen here. So you can see that this is yet just another aspect of what we've been seeing all over South America, in Central America. But this is a slightly different demographic. These aren't the people who are coming through the Darièn Gap. They're not the people who are flying into countries south of Darièn. They're individuals who are flying into Central America and then flying into the United States once they get approval.
I would say it's one of the safest neighborhoods in the city. And it has this bohemian.
Un momento, señoritas. Shit's getting serious here in Mexico City. Got Jet Li versus Xenia, the Warrior Princess. So how's he coming, Anna?
Heartbreaking, inspiring. I don't know, I just want to help these guys, to be honest.
This young man here took a machete to the head from one of the cartels. He's a tough kid.
Se ve, sí se ve.
I'm in the tent city where we find Venezuelans, people from Ecuador, here in Mexico City. It's an amazing thing. Whenever I approach these places, people always tell me they're dangerous. Don't do it. They're dangerous. The fact of the matter is they're always afraid of me. They're always afraid of the people approaching them, and it's because they're vulnerable. And once they discover I mean them no harm, everything changes. And you have the opportunity to talk with them, to share the gospel with them, to buy them a little food, a little water, some supplies, some things that they perhaps need. I think I caught a guy there coming out of the bathroom. Poor fella. Anna here, she's done a great job for me, translating.
Yeah.
She's just rolling with the punches. And
Hello, we're happy. Estamos felices.
here's my amigos. My amigos. Mi amigos.
Pues no sé si las historias de cada uno.
Got a little food here. We went next door. Got a little bit.
Ya están comiendo.
Sí, no habíamos comido, no habíamos desayunado. Welcome, people.
These folks are hungry.
Gracias, gracias.
Bien. It's no problema. Okay. ¿Cuántas personas?
Un ratón, Anoche lo matamos porque se nos come la comida. Ratón.
¿Cómo estás?
Aquí. Dígame.
Más o menos.
Yo le voy a pasar el video de ellos para que cuando van. Aquí hacen la comida. Y allá. Y aquí
So there's food. That's where they do their cooking.
And there's where they use the trunks to be able to cook.
I'm talking to a group of these people in Mexico City who haven't eaten for days. So I take them to buy food for them. They were so humble. We'll show you some video of this. They were so humble. I said, look, bring some guys because we're going to get bottled water and it's heavy. So I need several guys to come with me. So we go a couple of blocks away to a store and it's like a prison. You have bars and they don't let people in. So you have to point through the bars at what you want. And they were so humble. They chose a couple of cans of tuna and some baby formula. And I said, no. Let's get every can of tuna they got. Let's get every sardine can they've got, stuff that will last. Do you need toilet paper? They cheered. I said, let's get the toilet paper. Let's get some Tylenol. You probably need some basic things like that, some handy wipes, more milk, more baby formula. So we're piling all this stuff up. And I go to pay for it, and they go back to their little tent, and they're making sandwiches, and they offer me a sandwich. I hate tuna. I hate fish. So I politely declined, but it was awfully gracious of them, and I was moved that they did. And I said, listen, before I go, do you have any questions for me? And they started asking me such naive questions. Does the Rio Grande have crocodiles in it? We've heard that it does. And I said, well, take it from me as a guy who swam across the Rio Grande and back. There are no crocodiles in the Rio Grande. And then someone asked a question about the presidential election, and they expressed fear that Trump would win. And I said, this is an opportunity for me to explain something to you. And I said, you need to understand that Democrats are not your friends. They thought that was interesting. And I said, not your friends. They're going to pretend like they're your friends. But let me tell you, they're bringing you into the country because they want to use you for their own nefarious political purposes. If they cared about you, do you think they care somebody here was eaten by a jaguar? No. Do you think they care that this girl here was raped? No, they don't care. These people care. These people are haters of humanity. They don't care about you. They said, who does? I said, have faith in the American people. I said, you need to understand that the American people are afraid of you because our media highlights instances of people who are entering the country and are committing rape, kidnapping, fraud, violent crime, you name it. And they all seemed very surprised by this. And I said, yes, it's true. And they said, well, we've met some of those kind of people in the Darièn Gap. And I said, yes. And I said, those people are entering into the country and they give you all a bad name. But I said, you need to understand that the American people are afraid of you. And it's because their own government is using you against them and they resent it. And it is because we are in a global war of elitists against populace, against ordinary people oppressing them. And they said, we understand this. It's why we're leaving our own countries. And I said, well, it's happening in America too. You need to understand this. I said, but I want to tell you, the American people are fundamentally decent and generous people. But if they keep their distance from you, it's because they think you're there to hurt them. They believe you're there to hurt them. Be patient with them. And understand that real churches and real Christians will help you. But you need to understand Democrats are not your friends and you need to obey our laws. And their response to that was very, very positive. This is good intel. You've given us good information that we can use because we didn't know this. We didn't know what was happening. And I said, yeah, this is all happening. Ladies and gentlemen, your anger, spew out your venom, not at me, who's just the messenger. I'm just telling you. I'm just telling you the truth. Don't spew it out towards these decent people. You can tell me until you're blue in the face how they're violating the law and all this kind of stuff. It's a pointless endeavor. They're coming. And unless you plan to keep them out, they're coming because the Biden administration and no Trump administration is going to prevent them from coming either. They can't because the Justice Department and the Department of Homeland Security have been weaponized against any potential conservative president. And you better believe the Pentagon has been too. So they are coming. Now, you can put your fingers in your ears, cover your mouth, cover your eyes, pretend that none of it is happening, or you can prepare as a Christian ought. And I'm saying to you that, yes, we press our politicians for border enforcement, proper immigration law. We call for it, we press for it, we vote for it. But if that's the whole of your strategy, it's woefully insufficient because millions of those people are already here and there will be millions more before anything is done. And they're coming to your neighborhoods, to your towns. They're coming to your churches. They're coming to your organizations, to your businesses. And if you are not ready, you will be driven off the cherry orchard. That's the reality. Be angry with me for telling you that if you want. But that is the reality. We are in a battle for civilization. And wouldn't it be wonderful if all of these illegal aliens in our country who Democrats intended for evil, the Lord used for good. Wouldn't that be wonderful? Wouldn't that be wonderful if a great awakening and revival were to take place in this land because Christians took seriously their responsibility to fulfill the Great Commission, not just when times were good, but when times are bad. When times are bad, I look to Scripture for models. And you know, one that keeps coming to my mind is Daniel. His home country was overrun. He was sent into exile. But he remained steadfast in his obedience to the Lord. And the Lord honored Daniel and his friends. He didn't just say, it's an illegal war. It's an illegal invasion. I shouldn't be arrested. I shouldn't be exiled. Why am I here? Daniel dealt with the reality of his situation, and he was faithful to God, and he looked to God for guidance and for wisdom. And it is to the Lord that I point you. This is an opportunity, ladies and gentlemen, for your mettle to be proven, for your worth as a Christian to be proved.